Now being recorded.
All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back. My name is Lisa Jonas. I'm Program Director at the Gehring Center, and I'll be your moderator today. Just a throwback to last week, my teammates were telling me that we all got an A for effort, but not so great on the execution side. And I appreciate all the nice notes that everybody sent in. The silver lining in all that is we had way more people trying to log in than our system. We had a subscription to handle. And so that was the cause of the technical difficulties. So we greatly appreciate that you hung in with us and that you have rearranged your schedule to be with us again today. And it is going to be well worth your time, I promise. Let me get my slide advancer working here. Sorry. So one of the things we're all wrestling with right now is how do we balance compassion with results? Whether your business is booming or your revenue streams have completely dried up, we still need to continue to serve our customers, be good partners to our suppliers and vendors wherever we are in the value chain, and coach our team members who are working differently. Thankfully, we have two sales and marketing experts on the phone with us today to help us with that. We have Miss Pam Beek. She is the president and owner of SalesCore, who is joined by Amy Connor, who is president and owner of CMO on Loan. Both have successfully navigated economic recessions before, although I'm confident that it's their first go round with a global pandemic, but we're hanging in there and doing great. Before we get started, we always take a moment to thank our sponsors, and this webinar is no different. Thank you to MCM, CPAs and Advisors, Huntington Bank, and Coors and Bassett, who, along with great volunteers like Pam and Amy, underwrite these programs so we can offer them to our members with no expense. So I'm going to turn it over to Pam and Amy in just a second, but quickly a few housekeeping notes. First of all, this is being recorded, and we are going to share this recording after the program is over today. We'll email you the link, and you can share that with whomever you choose. We're also going to post that to a resource page that we have on the Gehring Center website, gehring.uc.edu. There's a link on the homepage that will take you to all the resources around the content we're sharing during this time. I'm sure you figured out that your line is muted. That's to eliminate background noise, but we still want to make this a highly interactive presentation to the extent that we can. So I want to direct your attention to the chat box in the lower left-hand corner. Throughout the call today, Amy and Pam might be throwing questions at you, or you might have a question for one of them. Just go ahead and enter it there. I will say, if you are looking at your screen in the full screen mode, you're not going to see things like the presenters' faces or the chat box. And if that's how you want it, then that's just fine. But if you do want to see all of that and engage through the chat box, you're going to have it on the small screen mode. So with that, I think I'd like to just go ahead and turn it over to Pam and Amy. So go ahead, Pam and Amy.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you to the Gehring Center for really meeting the needs of the members in such a very quick time. And we talk about this time, and I've heard the word unprecedented so many times, I'm not sure it still has meaning. But we've certainly lived through other times where things are difficult, but certainly not something like this where businesses shut down. You know, you think of 9/11 and you think of the financial situation that we had in 9 and 10. Nothing has been like this. So how do you balance compassion with results? And we've talked about sales disruption for a long time, and this is really a disruptive time, so it's more important than ever to be thinking about this. And one component of that is marketing integration, sales and marketing working together, which is why I'm so happy that Amy Connor could join us today.
Yeah, thank you, Pam. Thank you for including me in. To Lisa and the Gehring Center, I am a recipient of some of the great webinars you've had already, so thank you for doing this for everyone. It's a great example of what Pam and I will be talking about today, helping mid-market companies, helping each other navigate through this time. And as Pam said, it's a lot about how sales and marketing and all the functions work together.
Great. Let's talk about recognizing the current conditions, and we're going to start with the compassion side of this. One thing that I've noticed in some of the conversations that I've been having with sales leaders and others is that the change curve is really not understood, And so I wanted to bring this to our attention to talk a little bit about what a change curve looks like. And we all go through it. I have certainly been in different stages of the change curve. We start with denial, and I've certainly been there. And then we typically go to anger, and that's really on the negative side of the curve. Then as you start to work through some of your emotions, you can go through exploration and acceptance. And it doesn't mean, if you get into exploration, it doesn't always mean you won't go back to anger, so you can go back and forth. So it's really important to understand where you are so that you can deal with the emotions and move through as productively as possible. And we'll talk about some of those ways today. But before I go any further, I'd love to ask, where are you individually in the change curve model? If you could just provide some input in chat on where are you in this model, it would be great for us to talk about.
We'll just give it a few seconds to let the chat box populate. On the last call that we had, people were incredibly positive and leading on the exploration and acceptance side of the curve. And it looks like we have the same thing again here today. I still am firmly in the middle, but personally, but it looks like many on our call are on the exploration and acceptance side, which is all positive. So that is certainly great to see.
It is great to see, and I think that we've been through a lot of change, and change is happening on almost an hourly basis. So being able to stay on that positive side is important, but also remember that if you're not on that positive side, to just recognize it and move through it. Not only is it important for us to understand where we are, but it's important for us to understand those around us and where they are, whether they are our coworkers, whether they're people who work for us, or they're people at home. So let's ask, where in general would you say your team is on the change curve?
So before you're answering from a personal point of view, now you want everybody to answer from the perspective of their entire team. Let's see what's changed. I would say the Gearing Center team is a little more on the positive side than I am. I'm in the middle, and then we have maybe one or two outliers on the negative side still struggling.
Mm-hmm. And it's important to know and recognize where people are so you can help them, if they're in denial, get through the anger piece and recognize where they are so that they can get more towards the positive side. And that's the compassion piece of this.
Yeah. You know, just looking at these responses come through the chat, I would say about 60% are on the positive side, but folks are acknowledging that not everybody's in the same place. Some people are definitely struggling, especially people who are extroverts, like most people in the sales and marketing community are, right? They might be climbing the walls right now, spending a lot of time thinking about things that don't make them feel good, which leads to
another thing to think about is this could be a day-to-day, hour-to-hour conversation. I don't know if you watch the news, sometimes when another thing comes out, or if you watch the ticker, that can change it. So if you know that that's something that's going to bring you back into anger, negative, then maybe pause on that. And Pam has an idea later to help manage self-care. But just keep in mind that this does happen. It does change. It is real. And acknowledging where you are and figuring out how you, especially yourself, the only one you can truly control, can get to exploration and to acceptance.
Yeah, right. And then for those who are not where you are, if you're on the positive side, help those around you to acknowledge their feelings and get through this to the point where we can get to a positive place. But we would be Pollyanna if we said everybody was in this positive side for right now, especially. So recognizing where you are, let's talk about what are some of the things you can do to take control. So the first thing is, let's develop a contingency plan. How do I get control of my business, or if I'm a salesperson, my individual business or my territory? The very first thing that we need to think about, and we've done some research on what's worked in challenging times and what hasn't. So what has not worked is cutting cost. Cutting costs will not help you get through this time and certainly won't help you with filling sales. The other thing that you don't want to do is just fill the pipeline with quantity. It has to be quality. And that's counterintuitive. But if you spend some time looking at what our value proposition and what are the most likely things that we can close and spend your time there, it has been found to be more successful through research than just let's fill the pipeline. The other thing that we need to think about is, as managers, getting closer to the salespeople and closer to the sales with the customers, because right now customers are buying something that's no risk. So if you can find the value proposition that's a no risk value proposition, come along your side of your salespeople and help them through this, then your chances of closing are much higher. And the final thing is to think about, how do I help my salespeople not operate out of a position of fear? When any of us are operating out of a position of fear, the buyers really do notice that, and they typically move away from that. So how do we come from a position of strength and abundance and not fear? And as a manager, it's helpful for you to be a part of that. So staying focused, making a plan, and Amy's going to talk in a little bit about what a plan looks like, but make a plan, and staying engaged with your salespeople is really important and what works in a time like this. So Amy, do you want to talk a little bit about communication to your audience?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Pam. So as Pam just talked about, a lot of what you're trying to do right now is take care of people. And in order to make a plan, we put together a guide. And really it starts with establishing a communications team. This is not some big formal team. It's a couple of people that you can count on who have the information about what's going on in the world that's relevant, what's going on with customers, clients, different audiences, you name it. We'll get to that in a minute, and can make decisions. Set time to meet with them on a consistent basis, in video if possible, but really the most important thing is so that you know each of you will get together and be able to make decisions quickly. The second thing you should do is think about all of your audiences. So you could have employees, you could have clients, customers, patients, you could have different vendors, contractors, you can even have stakeholders or even the communities. You might have a longer list than that. We just put some examples up there, but you need to think of every single one of them. And then the next thing you do, and this is the biggest question we've gotten in the last several weeks, is how do I communicate? How do I think about what I should say and when I should say it? Well, the guidance goes back to, again, your audience, and as Pam said, the people that you're taking care of right now. You need to think about each audience that you've prioritized. Maybe some don't really need communication from you right now. And what is it that they need to be reassured and to get some hope from you? Specifically, if you're changing the way you operate, by all means, you should communicate that. If you're not really changing the way you operate and you don't think people are going to have a question about it, it's okay not to say something right now. Now's the time to share relevant information in video if possible, we're actually hearing, versus a bunch of long emails, just because it's too much to read. We are just totally overloaded right now, so keep that in mind. The next thing to think about is marketing in general. A lot of people are moving from trade shows or in-person meetings or in-person events to more social media. And we're seeing this a lot with our clients. Clients who might not have embraced LinkedIn in the past are realizing it's their only venue, and it's actually a great way to communicate with different constituents. So make sure you continue to think about what's important for your audience, specifically how it impacts them, not just how it impacts you. Think about empathy, as we talked about, not hard selling. If you're running advertising, make sure it's relevant. We saw a couple of things that I felt bad for some advertisers who I know from my P&G experience planned for months in advance for the Sweet 16 basketball, and they had their big advertising out when they couldn't have stopped it. But beyond that, now's not the time to be running those normal messages you would run. You can change them. You don't have to stop them. As Pam said, we don't advocate that you should just cut all marketing, but you need to be really thoughtful about what you are marketing. What are you saying? How are you staying in the back of people's minds so that when they're ready, you're still on their mind. You don't want to go dark and be forgotten completely. And yes, you might need to lower budgets. For example, some of our clients have, they had to close their offices for some period of time. Well, paying for AdWords that drive you in today, probably not the right thing to run. But you can also transition that, especially in this digital world, to other type of advertising if that's going to help keep you in the top of mind of your customers. And then along the line, and Pam said this so well, really think about how you can help. It can be anything from a personal check-in, like Pam says, to offering, can I introduce you to anybody, to even if there's an opportunity. One of our clients has licenses for software, and they have a lot of manufacturers who are ramping up right now. So they're offering complimentary 3 months of software to help them get up and running. So it can really run the gamut, whatever's appropriate for your business, but offering to help. And then as a uniting force with the team, be consistent, get a theme. I'm not saying get some, just funny little story going on, but I'm saying be consistent of what is your internal communication, how are you going to treat your customer, how are you going to treat all your constituents, and how are you going to be consistent across every single function, not just marketing, not just sales, but accounting, support, engineering, you name it. Whoever is facing the customer needs to think about what is it that person on the other end of the line or the other end of the video call needs right now, and how do I help? So that's about it for the communication plan.
And just a quick question for you, Amy, if it's okay, can I jump in right now? Because sometimes it can be challenging. You want to be aligned in what you communicate, right, across your team and to your customers and suppliers, internally and externally. But sometimes if your senior leadership is not being proactive with that plan, what advice do you have for the callers how to manage up with regard to creating a plan that everybody's aligned with?
Well, we've heard a lot of leaders actually say that they just couldn't wrap their mind around how to do a plan. And someone more junior came to them and said, look, here's an idea, what do you think? And it was a real relief for the leader. So we are encouraging people of all levels to be able to say, look, this is what I think we should do. Here's a communication. And of course, get it vetted with that person. And then there you've got to start.
People on the front lines are experiencing the issues, right? And they're usually a great resource for determining what needs to be communicated to you, and can pull it together for you quickly. So lean on the whole team.
Yep. I think we had a question, Lisa.
Social media options seem ideal for B2C, but what about B2B, where shoe leather has been key?
That's a great question, and I'll tell you, especially most of our customers right now are B2B. Social media is more relevant than it's ever been, in particular LinkedIn and other resources. So what we've had many of our clients do who have information for their industry that's useful to their clients, instead of doing what they normally do, which is just email out to their clients, they're adding to that. They're creating webinars to help all of the potential clients and prospects, or even people who are working with other companies, because it's relevant and useful. They're posting that, they're making videos and putting it on YouTube, they're putting them on their sites, and they're linking, they're using it at LinkedIn. They're also making more communications out because people are online, in particular with B2B, more than they ever have been. Joining groups, now's a great time to get engaged with industry groups. That is easy to do on LinkedIn. So while, yes, in social media, it's actually I'm finding it more overwhelming to communicate with consumers on social media, because that's where most of it has been, and it's just getting inundated. On the business side, I'm seeing some of the best webinars, some of the best resources come out in the last 2 weeks as companies are saying, wait a second, I can help. That's what I've seen. Pam, Lisa, have you seen anything like that?
Yeah, I'd like to jump in here on a couple of things. The first thing is, I think it's important that as salespeople, and somebody the question was about shoe leather, and I think that question comes up a lot right now, particularly on the sales side. I think it's important that we understand and connect with our customers and our prospects from the standpoint of what are you experiencing right now, and how can we help you versus what can I sell you? Those are two different kinds of conversations. And if you pull in your marketing team and between marketing and sales, you really get in touch with your prospects and customers and what they're experiencing. You'll be very armed with what is our value proposition. And as I mentioned before, the safe bet, the low risk, the research showing that if you can give them a low risk option, they're likely going to choose your solution. How can we develop our solutions around that no risk and low risk? We can't do that unless we really are in touch with our customers and asking them the questions. What are they experiencing? What are they feeling? And then bringing that information back and deciding what can we do with that today. And we have an example of that internally. We had a client of ours put on social media this week something that we're helping them with, and a company out in Pennsylvania just called us out of the blue because they said, we need that, because we were listening to what our customers really are saying they want and they need. I'd like to also kind of chime in on the leadership concept. Just because your top leaders cannot, of course, utopia is the top leaders have the time, they can help drive some of this communication. This is a great opportunity for people who don't have leadership in their title to stand up and show that they have leadership skills by helping put these communication plans together in the appropriate way. Obviously, that's part of leadership skills. But don't think because you don't have leadership in your title, you can't put your foot forward and say, here, let me help get this started, this initiative started.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. Anything else on this topic, or should I advance the slide?
Let's go.
I think we're good.
Let me get
So in terms of your communication, whether it's internal or external, we would love to hear from you. What is your biggest challenge with communicating? Is it maybe what audiences, your team internally is not aligned? Whatever it is, we'd love to hear what you're dealing with.
You know, I'll just, while we're waiting for this to populate, I know that some companies might not have that content marketing, that intellectual property queued up and ready to share in a way that's meaningful. And if that's the case, what a better time now to sit down and develop that thought leadership. And that's another way to demonstrate your leadership ability, Pam. Start publishing what you really know and only you uniquely know through LinkedIn publishing. Great opportunity.
Yeah.
So this is a common theme. I'm just sharing with you what we see in the chat box here. Employers are closing up shop and no one is there to contact at this time. That is true, and getting through to people can be risky or difficult, not risky, but difficult. Any advice there?
I think for the sales side, again, focusing on those opportunities that you think you do have an opportunity to close and are more likely to close. We're not going to close business with somebody who shut their doors for the time being. So find other people to talk to. People are still answering emails. People are still answering their phones. So if you have contact information and just want to check in with folks that you might have somewhat of a relationship with, I can tell you the people that I have talked to are very appreciative that somebody just calls them and says, how are you doing? And it's a great way and great time to develop a relationship.
Mm-hmm. One of the good points that just surfaced in the chat box, what if you have something really difficult and kind of scary that you're trying to very carefully manage communications around? Like this person noted, what if supply is about to dry up? Okay, and you're the person in the middle that's got to, you know they're waiting for it. Maybe you don't have all the facts and you're dealing with ambiguity yourself, but you have to be able to proactively communicate. Any advice there?
What we're seeing in the market is after you segment your customers on the ones who are the most, who need the information the most, and talk about your current audiences, really understanding what they need to hear and in what timing. So if you know their business, which Pam has talked about, if you know their business and what the impact it's going to be, then put yourselves in their shoes about when they might need to know that, so that they can be hopefully reassured, we understand things are going to happen, and not blindsided. So what would you want if you were that customer? And again, you may have lots, and there are lots of different situations. I completely understand that. But in general, we are saying, and we are seeing in the market, even the big companies, communicate at the time when you think there's something they could do about it if they could, and or that it is accurate. That's the other thing. We see people projecting really far out in the future, and they're actually losing credibility because no one knows what's going to happen next week, much less way out in the future. So I would err to the side of what you believe based on relevant data and communicate what you think people need to know at this time.
And don't forget, when you have a salesperson who has to either reinforce or communicate that original message, that they have the right words and they're working with marketing so that those messages are coordinated. And this goes back to the salespeople need to understand the business and the industry of their prospects, and they need to be able to talk in their language. So making sure that they deliver that message in a language that the person can hear it from their lens.
Yeah. David Dye's comment in the chat box brings to mind, Pam, it underscores the need for sales managers and salespeople to be to be working tightly together right now. David brings up the point of customers who are slow pay or extending payments. So that could be you can send a powerful message with how you handle that topic right now. Any advice there?
I think that you have to make some business decisions, and some of those decisions have to be made at the leadership level. And so we need to be making sure that we are communicating internally about what those issues are. Amy referenced this. We need to make sure we're doing some segmentation, because what you do for your A customers may be different from those who are not your A customers. So we need to make sure we are all on the same page. That includes marketing, inside sales, customer service. We all need to be on the same page, and then being able to deliver that message. And David brings up that good point. Even before we were under this pandemic condition, the research was showing us that in 2020 is really going to be important for sales managers to get tight with their salespeople, and that is now more important than ever.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Thank you all for that. So focusing the team around the contingency plan.
So Amy and I both believe we have to have a plan, and this is where we get people into action, especially salespeople. They need to have a plan on what they're going to do. So Amy, you want to walk us through your action plan?
Yeah, that'd be great. Lisa, I think it's on the next slide. This can come in a variety of formats. It's really straight and simple. We put ours in Excel. There are lots of great project management tools. There are lots of different formats. But the idea is to pick one consistent way that everybody who you're developing this plan with can follow, whatever format works for you and your organization. It goes straight with an activity. This activity needs to be clear. Like when I think of a normal list, you could just literally check it off. What's the category? You may have things like take care of customers, deal with billing, whatever that is for you, that it's helpful to create categories on the work. Start date, number of days, and then there's your end date. It automatically populates in this example. And then we think about who's responsible. One person needs to be responsible per activity. So if you've got a really big project and you've got 5 people, that's not going to help people see very clearly how they are making progress. Pam has said this before, and I thought it was great. It's about movement, not motion. You don't want to be a gerbil in a wheel running around and everybody's looking at get pipeline bigger. That's actually not going to help anybody get the pipeline bigger. Now is the time to be okay to make it really specific. And then what's the status? And then what are the notes and next steps? Some people put, how are you stuck? And Lisa, I think the Gearing Center had a good example of how you put this in something like this into action.
Yeah, the Gearing Center follows traction. That's a process that we've been using for many years, and we do something every week called the L10 meeting, level 10 meeting. And one of the regular agenda items at the L10 meeting, in global pandemic crisis or not, is we go through our list of to-dos. And the to-do list, it looks much like this. It's an online document. The rule of thumb is if it's something that you're expected to complete before the next L10 meeting, it goes on the list. We run through the list. If somebody hasn't completed their to-do, then it's usually because there's a barrier in the way, and the team talks about how we move the barrier. And it can seem tedious, but it is extremely effective. And it highlights meaningful activity that has an outcome attached to it, and make sure you're focused on that. So I'm all for it.
And we recommend that in this time, especially as you start an exercise like this, that you look at this on a daily basis. And it could be a 15-minute call, it could be a 30-minute call, but you focus on this daily so that you know people are actually feeling the momentum of getting some activity done. And the difference between motion and movement, motion is activity, movement is moving things through the pipeline. And those are the things that we want to start seeing happening, is movement through the pipeline, especially on those deals that you have said, we are going to focus really hard on these deals because we have a higher chance of closing them.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point. Okay, we can come back to this if anybody has any questions, and then this is going to be shared as an Excel document with the materials that you receive after the call today. Right.
So before we go to what's on your mind, there's some things that you can do internally, things that you can do to get, we've talked about the external communication. Let's talk about some internal communication. Amy, you talk about the leader not just telling the individual to just go do it. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, as we've said, this is a remarkable time. And there are a lot of people who didn't go through 2008, who didn't go through other major crises, and they honestly don't know how to handle this. It's not their fault. So keep that in mind, leaders, especially if you've got some great, more junior people who they might need a little more guidance. Now, we're telling them on one hand, step up, develop a plan. On the other hand, they're probably going to need some guidance to help them to do that and to do it well. And every young person I've talked to, and I mentor many, is they've said, I really want to help, I just don't know how. So, and I would guide the young people. Maybe it's not your leader in your organization. Maybe it is a mentor from another place. Maybe it's a friend who's maybe a couple of steps ahead or is getting that sort of support. But I would highly encourage young people in the organization or more junior people to get resources you need and ask for the help from your leader, and leader know that they might be intimidated because they don't know how to do this and they really want to, and they may need an extra hand up.
It gets back to tools and touches. Give them the tools and touch them and let them know that they're supported. There are some other things that we can do internally as well to keep more momentum going. Number one, don't forget to celebrate some wins. You're going to have some short-term wins, and I don't care how small they are. Make sure that you are celebrating with the team and making sure that the team is staying connected. One of the things that we're doing now is video conferences every day, just to make sure that we're touching each other, we're saying hello, we're talking about things that are working for us. Learn how to share what you're hearing in the market and the learnings. We have a running list of some of the things that we're learning as a team. So, and we put that in a central place. So if somebody's needing some help or needs to reference back to that to give themselves a boost, we have that running list of what we're learning, what we're hearing, those types of things. And it helps us create a value proposition for our clients. And then finally, don't forget about yourself to be able to stay positive. Create a structured schedule for yourself. And if that means Getting up and getting fully dressed, top and bottom, it's up to you. But make sure that you have a structured schedule every day. We also recommend that you use time blocking, which means if I'm going to place calls, I have this hour or this 2-hour block, and protect that block of I committed to calling these people on this day. Here's the time frame I'm going to use, and use that time blocking. Also, give yourself time to think. Amy and I both talked about this. We've been on webinars, conference calls, video chats, all of these things hour after hour after hour. And that can be very taxing on your body, especially if you don't give yourself a little bit of a break to get up, to move, to drink some water, to do what you need to do. Speaking of drinking water, eating healthy, getting sleep, getting your exercise is really important. When you think about going through the change curve, and let's face it, most of us, our schedules are changing on an hourly basis, make sure that you are getting enough sleep, because sleep is the way your body recovers from that kind of stress. The other thing that I think is really important, and Amy touched on this a little bit, decide what your block is, but my block is 2 30-minute news updates a day, and that's it. Not necessarily listening to all the negativity that's out there. 2 30-minute times, that's all I do. That's the news I get, and I don't continue to hear the negativity over and over again. So I am controlling the message that's coming into me. Mm-hmm. And Amy, you had an additional comment.
Yeah, it goes in line with the reaching out to your teams. I can't say it enough. We are all busy in a different way right now, and our minds are full with different types of information. And so as a leader and or a person on a team, make that step to ask for time. You may think, oh, the leader's too busy, or you may think, oh, I don't know what to say to the team member right now. Make the step to ask for time, even if it's 15 minutes, like Pam said, just touch base. If you can do it video, that's great. Now I realize, and I have been on many of the calls where there's a technical issue, and then you give it a nice chuckle. But try the best you can to stay in connection with people.
So today we did a virtual lunch hour, and I had lunch delivered to the team. So they had lunch, and we did a virtual lunch hour and just caught up that way, which was really nice. So get creative, think about those things. Our goal today was to give you tips and ideas to stay focused, engaged, and positive during this time. Now I think it's time for you to tell us what's on your mind.
Well, Pam, I have a couple of questions that came into the registration process. So how about we start with those while we're waiting for people to populate the chat box?
Absolutely.
Okay, sounds good. This question is kind of scary to me. Do you have any insight on transitioning to a strictly remote plan if we're dealing with this for the foreseeable future? I think it's easy to think about how we'll do if it's just through the end of April or maybe the end of May. Have you thought about what happens if we're stretched to August, September?
Oh, geez. I was thinking if nobody said it, it would never come true.
That's right. You know, I think that we're going to have to get creative, and I think that thinking about this now and what we're learning and keeping that list of what we're learning will inform us if we do have to go through a longer period of time. I think that video chat is going to become, I don't care if this isn't extended, I think video chat is going to become more and more of the norm. I have found that people have been open to communicating via the video chat. I think we're just going to have to get really creative. I also think our internal teams are going to have to do a lot of brainstorming around what is our value proposition today versus what it was before. And that can be very scary, but I also think you can get creative and you can push some things forward that might have been in the back burner just by being able to do this and try some things out. Don't be afraid to experiment. We have a brainstorming session that's coming up with one of our clients, and typically you want to be in the room with people who are brainstorming. So we've practiced the technology, we've practiced what we're going to do, and it's something that we're all in this together. And so we really have to think about, first of all, giving grace to one another as we're trying these things, and just do the right thing for your customer.
Yeah. Amy, anything to add?
I totally agree. I would say if you get in the rhythm between what Pam and I both talked about, one is having a team, continuing to stay in a cadence of communication, stay in a cadence of learning and evolving. That's actually a really good discipline that a lot of organizations use quite well. You've heard of Agile, you've heard of all sorts of things. There's actually a discipline that says you need to be able to respond. The other thing to think about is I'm reading this book by Simon Sinek called The Infinite Game, and it's about how the very best companies think about the long game, not the long game in a quarter or a year, but in a lifetime and beyond a lifetime. And I'm not saying go out and come up with your just cause tomorrow, but it's helped me think about beyond this short, it's going to be a very short, even if it's 6 months, right? A short period in the history of the world. What did I do in that period, and how are we going to get out of it? And then separately, I'm keeping my ears to the ground. A friend of mine who I think might be listening, he's working with a group to do virtual trade shows. So what if you can't get to those trade shows, and that's a huge B2B way? Well, are there people innovating? I guarantee you that there are, and they're working on it now, and they'll be prepared even if this goes longer. So a couple of things to consider.
Yeah, one thing to consider is that, Pam, you mentioned that video chat is probably the new norm, regardless of whether or not we're in this situation. I would agree with you. Now we've all invested considerable time learning how to use these technologies and multiple technologies, so that barrier is removed for us. So that's a positive. The other thing I would say is that the new norm is disruption. Plan to be disrupted. If not this global pandemic, 4 months from now, we'll have some major technology breakthrough, or a business is going to come along and disrupt your value proposition to your customer. It happens. That's the world we live in now. And so this is good training. This is getting us up to speed on what we're going to have to do all the time, whether in isolation or not. Okay, I'm going to shift gears on you. And this could be a challenging one. What do you recommend? What have you seen related to adjusting commission plans or rates for sales teams with a solid base salary and commission on top of that for companies that can continue to operate? So answer that specifically or just address it in general, but that's a big issue.
It is a big issue, and I think, first of all, I would caution anybody who's going to make a change, whether in their employee base or the commission, that they talk to their banker first, because if you are going for one of these care loans, especially the PPP loan, you can't make changes to your staff unless it's not virus related. So I am not a banker, I don't play one on TV, but I would highly encourage you, before you make some of those decisions, that you talk to your banker, especially if you're going to reach out for some help from the government. I've seen different things happen. Some folks who are not asking for that help, taking maybe 10, 15, 20% off of the base salary. But I would also encourage you to think about the choices that those folks are going to have to make. If they are a valued resource, then you're going to want to try to keep them and do what you can to keep them, and also not put them in a place of fear, because fear stops sales. And if you have people who are not performing, feel free to make those moves, but just know that there will come a time where you will need those valuable resources, and you want them to feel valued. The companies that we see that are taking a salary cut, a lot of them are putting it up to a vote to some folks of pay cut or layoff.
Well, pay certainly communicates value to people, particularly in the sales world that's so often ruled by commission structures. But I really think when you think about the theme of our webinar today, balancing compassion with results, that compassion piece is about how we're communicating value. So in some circumstances, it can be monetarily, but we communicate value in a lot of ways, whether we're talking to our people, or we're talking to our customers, or we're talking to our partners in the community. So Christine noted balancing accountability and compassion. Any insight? I think we need to revisit this and connect those dots a little more for the group.
Sure.
Yeah.
The way I look at this is we have to understand where people are, where they're coming from, but we also have to understand what the business needs, and we have to communicate what the business needs to not just our folks internally, but as Amy talked about, also communicating it externally. Where are we? And recognizing where people are coming from. Value propositions. How can I help my customer? What are some things that I can do to help them? Whether I get paid for that service or not, I can make that decision, but that's a business decision on a case-by-case basis. So it's marrying where are people with what do they need and what can our business do.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing to build on that I found with any project plan, whether it's during this time or another, is you develop the plan together. So you'll say, okay, we need to get X or Y done in the next week before our next meeting. What do we think the steps are? And allow the people to tell you what to think, whoever, whether you're a peer or a leader, and have everyone lay it out and say, who's the best person to do that? Allow people to provide input. And then I usually say, what's realistic in you getting this done? Or if we really need it faster, what needs to be true for you to get this done by this time? And then you have the person right there providing their, buy-in that needs to be done. And sometimes they may not agree, so you have to deal with that. But a lot of times I find the reason things don't get done is because people weren't really clear on what the action was, which is why it's so important to make each line specific. And then asking a couple of questions about how you would get it done or what resources you might need goes a long way. And then asking them about what they think timing would be. Then they're signing it up. They're creating their plan versus feeling like a plan's being made for them. And even if they don't completely buy in, but they agree with the broader goal, I've seen people suck it up and do the task. Or they bring up the issue. It's like, I just don't believe this is the right thing to do. And then it opens up a great conversation.
Good point. So I'm going to segue then to this, our last question. And this person positioned it, how do you tactfully ask for payment when we're all counting on AR being delayed? And that's certainly a big area where we have to have hard conversations. So I would just say start there, but feel free to broaden out to handling difficult conversations. That you're already in a tough time, and then you have to communicate something hard. What are your insights there?
I think part of this comes back to, first of all, knowing who your good customers are. And that's a business decision that has to be made. And then helping your salespeople deliver that message is extremely important. Do not leave it up to the salespeople to figure out how and what to say. I think it's a holistic discussion around here's what our business needs, here's what our relationship is with this customer, and here's how we're going to have to deliver that message. But we talk about it together. And this is, again, where the sales manager really has to come around with a sales team and help the sales team deliver that message once the business has said, this is how we need to handle this.
Okay. Amy, anything to add?
No, I would have said the same thing. Normally, I guess the good news is marketing doesn't always have to get into those. It's more the sales team. But what I would say is sales and marketing still need to be hand in hand. Get that customer segmentation. And they may need help with the messaging. And again, you want a messaging from accounting to be the same as support to the same as sales. So a role that marketing could help play at that time is to ensure that we are taking a common message and being very clear that everyone is providing that same message.
Yeah, that's really important and a great role for marketing. All right, so we've just talked about segmentation. Earlier, we talked about developing intellectual property into content marketing for use in times exactly like these, being ready for that. These are all good things to work on when we don't have the busyness of the whirlwind of our business in full operation that we could be doing now. Other things we could be doing now are reading books to equip us. So Pam and Amy, your pick for proactive reading during this time.
I like the concepts around the lost art of closing, because it talks about in any time what you need to be doing throughout the sales process to make sure you're matching value to what the prospect wants, and how to really make sure that you're doing the right things to close the business.
So I have a couple that I can think of. One I already mentioned, which is The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek, talking about how businesses think about the long game and who they serve and what they're trying to do. And it's about a lot of times making the world a better place, but in a specific and personal way. The two other that come to mind is one is Team of Teams by General McChrystal. And I think that's his last name. I apologize if I said it wrong. But so it is around how teams had to work differently when they went into Iraq. And I think of sales and marketing or any functions having to work together now, it's a totally new game. And you can't just have a hierarchy and one person says it and 50,000 people do it. You need to develop competencies and work in different ways. And the last one I would say is Donald Miller's The Story Brand. And the reason that this one is so helpful is because it talks about your brand and how your audience, your constituent, is the hero. You're not the hero. So a lot of the principles that we use at CMO and Loan, and I know that Pam does, it's all around how do I make that hero's journey a better, more remarkable experience from the very beginning to the end. So those are the three I could think of right off the top of my head.
Well, those are really good.
Yeah, there is another one, and I said this to the team today. When you are in tough times, you will figure out who your team players are. And there's a great book by Patrick Lencioni called The Ideal Team Player, and it talks about what to look for in a team player. But you'll see who your great team members are in this time, and that's a good book to reinforce that.
Okay. Well, any final comments, Pam or Amy, and then we can go into wrap up.
Remember to stay focused, engaged, and positive.
Focused, engaged, and positive. Amy?
And remember to work together. We will get through this together.
We will. And I'm just shocked that neither one of you hit on Pam's #1 tip earlier, which was wear pants. You never know if you have to stand up during a webinar.
Yes, please.
For webinar videos like this.
All right, everybody. I'm going to quickly recap our main points today. What you need to do: recognize the current conditions, right? You want to lead with empathy, understand where the person is coming from when you're addressing them or talking to them about any issue. Develop a contingency plan. Salespeople and sales managers should be working very closely together. Get the sales manager involved in the deal, and everybody needs to hold hands and play nice with marketing. We're a team. Communicate inside and outside your organization. Know who your different stakeholders are. Understand the messages that are important to them. Position the messages so you're addressing their need and not the need of somebody who isn't really particularly worried about that issue. Understand each other and communicate. Focus sales and marketing around your contingency plan. Amy shared a great tool for holding each other accountable for your to-dos. And tune into more Gehring Center webinars coming to a computer near you. So I want to thank everybody for your time. You guys hung in there through and gave us a lot of grace for a terrible experience last week, but we pulled through. It was great, and I hope you think it was well worth your time. On behalf of the Gehring Center, our sponsors, and all of our members in our learning community, we're going to go ahead and sign off for now, but we'll be in touch, and you all have a great day. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.